Chapter 1. The Boy from the Projects, Brooklyn, New York, 1953. In the Bayview housing projects of Canarsie, a boy named Howard Schultz is born into a world where dreams are a luxury few can afford. The Schultz family shares a cramped two-bedroom apartment, one of dozens stacked together in federally subsidized buildings. Here, success is measured not in ambition, but in survival. Howard's father, Fred, is a working man, a truck driver, a cab driver, a factory worker. He moves from job to job, each one paying barely enough, none of them offering a future. His mother, Elaine, keeps the household running on willpower and worry. There is no inherited wealth here. There is only the grind. But it is a single, brutal afternoon that will define Howard Schultz for the rest of his life. He is just 7 years old when his father comes home, injured. Fred has slipped on ice while delivering diapers, breaking his ankle and his hip. In that era, for a man like Fred, there is no health insurance, no workers' compensation, no safety net of any kind. Suddenly the family has no income and no way to pay for the care he needs. Howard watches his father, a man already worn down by life, become a man with a cast on his leg and a mountain of bills he cannot pay. Decades later, Schultz would carry the memory of that moment everywhere he went. He saw what it did to his father's dignity, the way the world discarded a man the instant he could no longer work. He was beaten down, Schultz would recall. He wasn't respected. That image of a father broken by a system that didn't care became the engine of everything Howard would later build. But none of that was visible yet. As a teenager, Howard discovers one path out of Canarsie: sports. He's a gifted athlete, and football becomes his ticket. He earns a scholarship to Northern Michigan University, the first person in his family to attend college. He arrives on campus carrying not just a duffel bag, but the weight of a family that has never escaped the projects. He graduates in 1975 with a degree in communications and almost no plan. He takes a job in sales at Xerox, knocking on doors, learning to talk to strangers, learning to be told no, over and over again. It is unglamorous work, but it sharpens him. Then he joins a Swedish housewares company called Hammerplast, rising quickly to become a vice president and general manager overseeing its U.S. operations. By his late 20s, Howard Schultz has done the impossible for a kid from Bayview. He has a corner office, a good salary, a company car, and a comfortable apartment in Manhattan. By every measure he grew up with, he has already won. He could have stopped there, but a strange order from a small store in Seattle is about to change the entire trajectory of his life. Chapter 2. The order that changed everything. It begins with a number that doesn't make sense. From his desk in New York, Howard Schultz notices that a tiny retailer in Seattle is ordering an unusual quantity of his company's drip coffee makers, more than entire department store chains. The company's name is Starbucks. Curious, Schultz flies across the country to see it for himself. What he finds in Seattle's Pike Place Market in 1981 is not a coffee shop as we know it today. Founded in 1971 by Jerry Baldwin, Zev Siegel, and Gordon Boker, Starbucks sells whole roasted beans and equipment, not cups of coffee to drink. But the moment Schultz walks through the door, something shifts inside him. The smell of dark roasted beans, the reverence the founders have for quality, the romance of it all, it captivates him completely. He becomes convinced this is his future. There's only one problem. Starbucks isn't looking to hire him, and the founders are wary. They see a slick New York salesman who might disrupt the soul of their small operation. Schultz refuses to give up. He courts them for a full year, flying back and forth, making his case again and again. Finally, in 1982, they relent. Schultz walks away from his secure, high-paying corporate life to join a 4-store coffee bean company as director of marketing, a decision his friends and family think is madness. Then comes the trip that ignites the revolution. In 1983, Schultz travels to Milan, Italy, on a buying trip. Walking the streets, he discovers something America has never seen: the Italian espresso bar. On nearly every corner, baristas pull shots of espresso, calling out greetings, while customers stand and talk, sip, and connect. These aren't just shops. They're a daily ritual, a community, a third place between home and work. Schultz is electrified. He sees it instantly. Starbucks shouldn't just sell beans, it should sell the experience. He rushes back to Seattle, brimming with conviction, and presents his vision to the founders. Open cafes, serve espresso drinks, build community. But the founders resist. They are purists. They believe Starbucks is a retailer of fine coffee, not a restaurant chain. Selling drinks to them feels like a betrayal of everything they stand for. Schultz pushes. They push back. He finally convinces them to test a small espresso bar inside one store, and it's a runaway success, drawing crowds within days. To Schultz, it's undeniable proof. To the founders, it's still not the business they want to run. The tension becomes unbearable. Howard Schultz, the man who fought for a year just to get in the door, now realizes the company he loves will not become what he knows it can be. He is standing at a crossroads with two choices: stay and surrender his vision, or walk away and risk everything to chase it alone. For a kid from the projects, with a wife and a baby on the way, the safe choice is obvious. He chooses the other one. Chapter 3: Betting Everything. In 1985, Howard Schultz does the unthinkable. He quits Starbucks. He walks away from the very company that inspired him to chase a vision no one else can see, to build the Italian coffeehouse experience in America under his own name. He calls his new company Il Giornale, after an Italian newspaper. But a dream without money is just a fantasy, and Schultz has no fortune of his own. He needs roughly $1.7 million to begin. So he does the only thing he can. He asks, and he asks, and he asks. Over the next year, Schultz pitches his idea to 242 potential investors. 217 of them say no. 217 rejections. Many tell him the idea is foolish, that Americans will never pay good money to stand around drinking espresso, that coffee is a commodity served cheaply at diners. Schultz later said that one of the hardest parts wasn't the rejection itself, but maintaining belief in himself when so many people doubted him. The world is filled with naysayers, he would reflect, and he refused to let them define his future. He keeps going. Eventually, the money comes together, and in 1986, Il Giornale opens its first store. It's an immediate hit. The vision works. Then fate hands him the opportunity of a lifetime. In 1987, the original Starbucks founders decide to sell the stores, the roasting plant, and the name itself. The asking price is $3.8 million. For Schultz, it's a staggering sum, far more than he has. But this is the company he loves, the brand that started it all. He cannot let it slip away. He races to raise the capital from his investors, fighting against a rival bid that nearly snatches it from his hands. He wins. At just 34 years old, Howard Schultz, the boy from the Brooklyn projects, buys Starbucks and becomes its chief executive. He merges Il Giornale into it and keeps the Starbucks name. Now, the real work begins. Schultz sets out on an audacious expansion, opening store after store, exporting the warm, third-place experience he envisioned to cities across America. But he never forgets his father. Remembering the broken man who lost everything after a workplace injury with no insurance, Schultz makes a radical decision for the late 1980s. He offers comprehensive health insurance to employees, including part-time workers who work as little as 20 hours a week. Critics call it reckless spending. Schultz calls it the foundation of everything. Then, in 1991, he goes further, introducing Beanstalk, granting equity ownership to employees whom he insists on calling partners. He's building the kind of company his father never had the chance to work for. The bet pays off spectacularly. In June 1992, Starbucks goes public and the offering is a sensation. The kid who once watched his family struggle to pay rent is now leading one of the most exciting companies in America. The empire is rising. But empires, as Schultz will learn, are far harder to protect than they are to build. Chapter 4: The Empire Cracks. Through the 1990s and into the 2000s, Starbucks becomes a global phenomenon. The green mermaid logo spreads across continents, thousands of stores, in countries on nearly every inhabited continent. Starbucks doesn't just sell coffee, it changes the way the world drinks it, introducing words like latte and venti into everyday language. Howard Schultz has become a billionaire and a business legend. In 2000, riding high, he steps down as CEO, moving into the role of chairman to focus on global strategy while others run day-to-day operations. The growth machine roars on. But somewhere in the relentless drive to open more and more stores, something begins to rot beneath the surface. To grow faster, Starbucks streamlines. Automated espresso machines replace the manual ones. Efficient, but they hide the craft and the romance of making a drink. Stores start selling breakfast sandwiches, and the smell of burnt cheese begins to overpower the aroma of fresh coffee that once defined the experience. The intimate neighborhood feel Schultz fought so hard to create starts to fade, replaced by something that feels mass-produced. In a now famous internal memo in February 2007, which leaked to the public, Schultz himself sounds the alarm. He writes that the company's relentless expansion has led to the watering down of the Starbucks experience and what he calls the commoditization of our brand. It is a stunning admission from a chairman. The soul of his company is slipping away. Then the world falls apart. In 2008, the global financial crisis hits with devastating force. Consumers, suddenly fearful and broke, decide that a $4 latte is exactly the kind of luxury they can live without. Starbucks, which had overexpanded into a saturated market, is dangerously exposed. Sales decline. For the first time in its history as a public company, customer traffic in U.S. stores falls. The stock price collapses, losing roughly half its value and at points far more, wiping out billions in market value. Analysts who once celebrated Starbucks now openly question whether the brand's golden era is over, whether it has expanded itself into irrelevance. The empire Howard Schultz spent 2 decades building is cracking in real time, in front of the entire world. He can no longer watch from the sidelines. In January 2008, after 8 years away from the top job, Howard Schultz returns as Chief Executive Officer of Starbucks. The mission is no longer growth. The mission is survival. He inherits a company that is bloated, unfocused, and bleeding, facing a recession that is crushing consumer spending everywhere. The decisions ahead of him will be brutal. Stores will have to close, people will lose their jobs, and the very identity of the brand will have to be torn down and rebuilt. The man who climbed out of the Brooklyn projects, who survived 217 rejections, who bet everything on a vision, now faces the greatest test of his career, and the whole world is watching to see if he can save what he built. Chapter 5: The Comeback. Howard Schultz returns to a company in freefall, and he makes a series of decisions that shock the business world. His first move is almost unthinkable for a man obsessed with growth. He slams the brakes. He announces the closure of around 600 underperforming U.S. stores and scraps plans for hundreds more. He cuts thousands of jobs, painful, gut-wrenching decisions for a leader who calls his employees partners. But Schultz understands that to save the company, he must first stop the bleeding. Then he does something that becomes legendary. On the afternoon of February 26, 2008, Howard Schultz closes more than 7,000 Starbucks stores across the United States, all at once, for 3.5 hours. The reason? To retrain every single barista in the art of pulling the perfect shot of espresso. The closure costs the company an estimated $6 million in lost sales in a matter of hours at the worst possible financial moment. Critics call it insane. Wall Street is baffled. But Schultz isn't making a financial calculation. He's making a statement to his employees and to the world. He is declaring that quality and craft matter more than speed, that Starbucks is going back to its soul. He recommits to the things that made Starbucks special: the romance of coffee, the third-place experience, the human connection. He invests in new technology and re-examines everything, even reformulating the breakfast sandwiches so they no longer overwhelm the aroma of coffee in stores. He flattens decision-making, demands accountability, and refuses to compromise on the customer experience. Throughout it all, Schultz holds on to a principle that defined his entire career. Risk more than others think is safe. Dream more than others think is practical. In the depths of the recession, while others retreat, he keeps investing in his people. He famously refuses to gut the health insurance benefit, even as analysts pressure him to slash costs. He believes that if he takes care of his partners, they will take care of the customers, and the customers will save the company. Slowly, the strategy works. The retraining, the closures, the renewed focus on quality, they begin to turn the tide. Starbucks streamlines its operations, embraces new ideas like its mobile and loyalty programs in the years that follow, and reconnects with the customers it had nearly lost. The financial results begin to recover. Revenue climbs back, profits return, and then surge to record highs. The stock, left for dead during the crisis, embarks on one of the most remarkable comebacks in modern corporate history, eventually soaring far beyond its pre-crisis peak. Howard Schultz had done it. He had walked back into a burning building and carried his company out alive, not by abandoning his values, but by returning to them. The crisis that could have destroyed Starbucks instead became the proof of what it stood for. By the time Schultz eventually steps back again, the company he twice led is stronger than ever, with tens of thousands of stores around the globe and a brand once again synonymous with the experience he first imagined on a street corner in Milan. Chapter 6: What the Boy from Bayview Teaches Us. To understand Howard Schultz's legacy, you have to return to that small apartment in the Brooklyn projects, and to a 7-year-old boy watching his father lie broken with no one to catch him. Because everything Schultz built was, in some way, an answer to that moment. He didn't just create a coffee company. He created a global brand that at its height employed hundreds of thousands of people and reshaped an entire industry. But the deeper achievement is what he insisted that company stand for. He extended health insurance to part-time workers when conventional wisdom said it was financial suicide. He gave employees equity ownership through Beanstalk, turning workers into partners. He even launched a program to help employees earn a college degree. He was determined to build the kind of company his father never got to work for, a place that treated ordinary people with dignity. That is the first lesson of Howard Schultz, that a business can be both profitable and humane, and that how you treat your people is not separate from your success. It is the source of it. The second lesson lives in those 217 rejections. The man who built a coffee empire was told no by hundreds of investors who couldn't see what he saw. He understood something that defined his entire life. That vision is worthless without the relentless courage to pursue it in the face of doubt. Risk more than others think is safe, he urged. Dream more than others think is practical. The third lesson comes from the crisis of 2008. When his empire was crumbling, Schultz didn't save it by chasing every shortcut or cutting every corner. He saved it by going back to the company's soul, by closing thousands of stores for 3 hours to honor the craft, by protecting his people instead of sacrificing them. He proved that in your darkest hour, the answer is often not to abandon your values, but to return to them. Howard Schultz's story is not a fairy tale. He faced controversies, fierce battles, and public criticism along the way, and his journey was never as smooth as a logo on a paper cup. But the arc is undeniable. A boy from federally subsidized housing who watched poverty steal his father's dignity rose to lead one of the most recognized brands on earth, and then refused to forget where he came from. He turned a 4-store bean shop into a place where millions of strangers gather every single day. In the end, Schultz captured his own philosophy in a single line: success is best when it's shared. He measured his wealth not only in stock price, but in the people he lifted along the way. The boy from Bayview built more than a coffee empire. He built proof that your past does not have to be your prison, and that the deepest success is the kind you carry others with you to reach.